you're all keeping well. And here we are back again with these continuing saga of the Corona Chronicles. And it just gets more amazing and interesting every single day as the the light of distraction and distortion starts to fade away, and people see what was really hidden or distracted from in the background and what was being blasted or hidden in shadow. And as contrast emerges and grey areas start to filter into our cognition, and we start to finally get clearer pictures of what is actually going on. Now, it's this is why I always said to you from the beginning of this whole thing during this series of videos is, don't go in full deep. Don't dive into the deep end of the pool, not in terms of the mainstream story or the conspiracy stories. The truth doesn't really exist. There's only a comforting consensus of common sense which floats somewhere in the middle between the deep and the shallow ends of the pool. And that's where you should always be, the old middle path. And otherwise, it's the same in everything else in life. There's no absolute truth. There's only enlightenment within the grey areas. Now, uh, there is a process within the occult and esoteric called inversion. And in alchemy as well. The basically involves around the idea of taking everything that's considered orthodoxy or convention and turning it upside down on its head. By doing so, it takes away from the dangers of dogma and spins it off into new forms of chaos. And this is discordia, and this allows new concepts of thinking, evolutionary tangents, and other ways of looking at things that would not have been otherwise accessible or conceptual had this inversion not taken place. So again, it comes from the Freemasonic idea of gathering up which has been broken and scattered and reassembling it into something new. Now, so the idea is that you take what was a rigid structure, you think of Lego blocks, right? You have a building, a certain building made of Lego blocks, right? Okay, that you look at that and you say, okay, it's a fire station. It's a fire station, okay? Then you you take all the Lego bricks apart, and then you rebuild it and without any plan, you rebuild it into something else, and it could be a house or a train station. Well, it's the same concept that you don't have any fixity of rigid thinking and conceptualization because it leads to dogma, and dogma is stagnation. Now, so this is where the whole concept of the black sun comes from, the Sol Invictus, which very much has brought itself into Freemasonry now, and esoteric things as a whole. Now, a couple of years ago, when I came out in this scene as a Luciferian pagan, it was like someone throwing a grenade into it, because the alternative scene since the 1970s, when it all began with Christian identity groups in the USA, people like the Posse Comitatus and those groups, they and the Christian identity actual people themselves, this followed through William Cooper and eventually through Alex Jones and David Icke and all the others, to where we have a situation where all the alternative scene was predominantly Christian. So everything that was considered bad was satanic, and which means nothing to you if you're not a Christian. It's because it was all coming from a Christian point of view. And so and I know I'm quite a small player in all this, but when I came out a few years ago as a Luciferian pagan, it threw so many people in the scene into chaos. And but it was a wonderful thing because people who were previously, satanic pedophile and afraid of a single eye, or celebrities doing this or this thing and that, we're all terrified of that stuff. Suddenly we're not terrified of it. I liberated him from it. I liberated him from it by saying, look at the other side of the equation. And suddenly, people who were suddenly rediscovering how cool things like dark imagery is, and alternative goth kind of darkness, and artwork, and people like it was okay for them to like H.A.R. Geiger again. It was okay for them to dig that stuff. It was okay for them to listen to dark music again, because that had been taken from them by the 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 rigidity of the dogma. This is why I said the other day that Marina Abramovich is an interesting person. She absolutely is. Does this mean I'm her best friend? No. Does this mean I support everything she does? No. But do I find her interesting? Absolutely. I find her fascinating, and some of her work I really am quite in awe of. And that's where it ends. Suddenly it's okay now for other people to look at this stuff and say, oh, that's kind of interesting, or that's kind of shit. And that's how I am about everything. And that's the inversion. Once you have fixity of structure in your thinking and your cognition, it's very difficult to break that. Very difficult, and it becomes painful to try and maintain it. There are literally so many flat earthers out there now who are tormented day and night with trying to keep the lie of the flat earth inside them. It's tearing them apart. When it'd be just better and easier to say, it was bollocks and I fell for it, and then you're free. It's the same with a relationship. It's holding a relationship together that's not working. It's not doing anything for you. Why stick around because you're friends or you're fucking her or something like that? Move on. The inversion is the liberation, okay? So with that in mind, this is what I've been trying to do with these videos. Those of you who are going, oh, we're all going to die of coronavirus, I've been trying to invert that thing to say, well, the chances are about 1% or 3%, although it is a very dangerous virus for someone who's very elderly or sick with a pre-existing condition. The chances of you dying from it is very, very low. At the same time, too, that's the inversion, at the same time too. Those ones who say, oh, well, 5G is causing it. No, it's not causing it. And don't be saying this thing, oh, that's not what we said. That's what you were saying, okay? Just admit you were wrong. There's great liberation in that, okay? And you see it with like things like Trump derangement syndrome. People absolutely destroying themselves in order to maintain the thing that Trump is a Nazi or he's an idiot, when he's neither of those things, and there's not even the slightest bit of evidence he is even close to those things. You don't come from a small family business that ending up owning half of Manhattan if you're not an establishment figure family like Vanderbilt, a Carnegie, or a Rockefeller. And he did that, and you don't do that if you're an idiot. And people can't see that. The media yesterday there was a story that he said the media were saying that if you inject bleach into you will this is what Trump said. This is what they're saying. Trump said literally, if you inject, here's how they presented the story: if you take kitchen countertop pine cleaner and inject it into your children, it will save them from coronavirus. That's how the mainstream media presented it. Okay, what he was really saying was that disinfectant and things like bleach and ammonia have always been used in medicines to treat viruses and infections. The truth. But the main reason the media ran with that story is because in the same press conference he said something that I never thought I'd ever see. Sunlight kills the virus, just like sunlight kills many infections. Now, when you see all these natural healers who all loved Hillary Clinton, and all these holistic types going crazy about them saying this, it really shows you how deep Trump derangement syndrome actually is. I have seen military manuals when I was researching for Puzzling People. I was looking to see if there was any military documents that would show that psychopathy is normal in the military. It was within certain elements of the leadership, the generals. Because I found a book that said that one of the Prussian military discovered that the biggest problem they had with their troops was they wouldn't shoot the enemy directly. They'd aim for his shoulder, his arms, or his knees. They didn't want to kill the enemy, and this was a tormenting thing in the mid 1800s for military leaders. Why don't men want to kill each other? And this shocked them. And this is where the whole Prussian education model came out of, and so on. Turned people into automatons, so they'll kill the enemy. And this ultimately is where the NPC, the normies, and the meat come from today. This is the legacy of that, destroying their humanity in order to make them dogmatic robots. Now, with no internal worlds, and it's been incredibly successful, you have to say. Now, the in those same, just by just chance, I came across a manual, and it was like officers in the British Army on a field guide thing from not the Napoleonic Wars, later the Peninsular Wars, and they were talking about how soldiers who are injured, or officers must order them to lie almost naked in sunlight, because the sunshine will heal their wounds quicker and prevent infection or gangrene setting in. So it has been known forever that sunlight, and taken very seriously, that sunlight cures so many illnesses. This is why during the time of the TB epidemics, all the sanatoriums were built high up in the Swiss Alps, above the cloud layers. And this is why people like even the Irish are even like Irish people would travel if they had the money to Switzerland and Bavaria, to sanatoriums if they had TB, to be above the cloud lines in order to absorb sunlight. And they just put them on wheelchairs or on couches or chairs. And literally the cure was to sit on top of the Swiss or Bavarian Alps, right? Like Harry Clark, the artist, did this, but he probably had cancer, so it didn't help him. And sit there facing the sun all day long, facing the sun. And sometimes, if they had good climate, they'd put them to the beach. This is why Crowley, I think, actually went to Hastings, was because he could sit on the beach to deal with his asthma. And you sit getting the sea air or the high altitude air, but the factor is the sunlight. And you would see them in the sanatoriums in Switzerland or Bavaria, and as they were, as the sun changed, the staff would come out and move that chair or the wheelchair around to face the sun as it was moving in the sky. And this is what cured them of their TB. So this has always been known. And so Trump brings it up yesterday. And Big Pharma, who doesn't want anyone to know that sunshine cures all kinds of viruses, kills all kinds of viruses, cures all kinds of infections, and aids healing, as well as mental issues as well. We all know that sunshine helps deal with seasonal disorders and mental health. They don't want people knowing this, so the spooks in the media turn it around to say that he says if you put fantastic kitchen cleaner into a needle and inject it into yourself, you'll kill coronavirus. The media, mainstream media, are extremely evil. This is the most evil force on this earth, is the mainstream media. There's nothing more evil than them. Now, that's because they don't want people healing themselves through sunlight. And now we have a bloody lockdown, right? And we're only allowed out for a short trip every day. Get out, and the sun has been shining because of the reduction in air traffic. Because there's less contrails in the sky, particularly in this country. It's been blazing sunshine non-stop here in the northwest of Ireland. It should be pissing windy and cold. It's simply because the transatlantic air traffic has been reduced so drastically. We're getting back to Ireland's natural climate. This is why Ireland was sold as a sunny destination up until the 1920s. You can go and look online, you'll find the posters, visit Ireland for sunshine, and all pictures of people on beaches and everything. And that's the truth. So that's why I'd be in favour of every year having 1 month in spring where we all have a lockdown for the environment, not for big pharma or for politicians. Now, talking about the lockdown further, although I'm sort of an anarchist in the sense that I'm in the middle. I don't have any political slant, left or right wing. I don't like either one. And because they'll all eventually drip to ultra right wing or ultra left wing. And I am a constitutionalist in the sense that I like the idea of a constitution of our country. because constitutions can be amended. Like for instance, and as a society changes, a constitution can provide at a national level, not in a local level, but a national level. A constitution can provide a rigid framework for the progression of a society in terms of moving forward. Like the American Constitution was a phenomenal success, okay? And so is the Irish Constitution to a strong degree as well. Even when it had a statute built into it until the 1990s that the Catholic Church had a favorite was favored as amongst all religions. That was removed from the Constitution. So you can amend constitutions, and this is why I really like constitutionalism in that sense. It's healthy. It's a protective measure for people in society. So that's why I have no problem with the idea of constitutions. Now, if you had a rigid constitutionalism, you wouldn't need elections all the time, because the constitutions would be so. The only thing you'd really vote on is the constitution itself. In fact, the Irish constitution is what saved us in many times of being taken over completely by foreign powers, such as the EU. Although they eventually destroyed that as well with the Second Lisbon Treaty vote. But this is what I'm going to talk about now is elections. When you don't have a job this time next year, your business is gone, or you had your home repossessed because you can't pay the mortgage, and you have a divorce maybe because the lockdown drove you and your wife or your husband apart, or you had a relative committed suicide because they were locked in all the time, watching the RTE and the BBC News with the doom and fear constantly, and they ended their life because they thought they were going to die of coronavirus. You know the names of the politicians in your country. You know the names of the bureaucrats, the senior civil servants who were all behind it. You know the names of the ones who had to for fuck's sake, stay at home, pictures on their Facebook page. You know their names. They have an identity, okay? And so it won't be a case of next year saying, how come I don't have a job? You know the names of all the guilty parties, from government to mainstream media to senior civil servants. Never forget them. In many ways, they're much more insidious and dangerous than the elected politicians, mass media spooks, and all these other types who are responsible. It won't be a mystery. You'll have a list of names in every country you live in. Always remember that. It won't be a mystery. Now, that brings us to a major reason why politicians wanted this lockdown. Why the health minister in Ireland comes at press conferences with his sleeves rolled up. Classic Tony Blair spin, spin, spin. Look, he's got his sleeves rolled up. He's fighting the virus. He's working day and night. Pure Tony Blair book of fucking New Labour spin. It's so transparent. And yet this is why the politicians are absolutely loving all this, okay? And I'll tell you why. Since Ronald Reagan came along, electoral politics has increasingly moved towards the elderly and elderly issues, okay? So therefore, why? Because the over 65s and over 70s started to become the primary economic force within Western societies and Western democracies. And these people vote constantly and rigidly along party lines. And the reason for this is, doesn't matter they vote left wing or right wing, they're rigidly devoted to the party line. And the reason for this is they're afraid. Older people are generally terrified or have been made terrified, and therefore they will make sure to vote on everything. These are all the NIMBYs as well, because they're terrified of change. And politicians love this, and this is why they pander to the over 70s. They've made it even more sinister. You ever notice, like, you have all these, like, Generation Xers and stuff like this, not Generation Xers, the the millennials and the SJWs, and I'm not saying all of them, just saying this is the way it is. Do you ever notice, for all their okay boomer thing, they're as frightened, timid, and terrified as elderly people? Do you ever notice that? For all their wokeness, they're absolutely terrified and frightened and devoted to the political system. to try and protect and save them. They're like little old people who think they're not like little old people. And you see that, and the reason why that is because the politicians and governments and spin doctors have actively made the young the new old. The new, they used to call them in politics the Grey Panthers. If you can get the Grey Panthers to vote for you, you'll win an election because they will. The old lady, the old lady widower at 70, 75, 80, 90 will be the first one down at the polling station to vote that morning. And if you when you get the elderly in first, the exit polls say such and such a politician is leading, and then this is why exit polls are really sinister. Then all the sheep, all the meat, run down and say, "Oh, this guy is winning the election. I better go and vote because it says in the exit poll." And they go down late at night after work, and they vote for him. This is why politicians pander to the elderly. They cannot really stay. They cannot maintain party politics without the elderly. So the whole thing, the reason why you have a two-party system is because these people who've always voted left-wing all their life or right-wing all their life, they never change, and the older they get, the more rigid they become. And so it was a vested interest in the government to take the younger generations and make them into that. So ironically, the ones going okay boomers are actually behaving and acting more like the pensioners that they're making fun of because they're all voting for Hillary because Hillary will save us. You know, this kind of thing. And they're all like, or Bernie or, Joe and this kind of thing. So that's that they've made geriatrics out of the young in order to maintain the two-party system. Both sides, I might add, both sides. So therefore, the lockdown. Now, who benefited more than anyone else from the lockdown? What demographic? The elderly. Firstly, they don't have jobs. They're getting their pensions. Their mortgages are paid for. No worries there if they're out of work. They don't go out anyway, so the lockdown didn't affect them. Okay. And the politicians, and it's a well-known fact that when these seasonal flus come around, who do they kill? The elderly. Who did coronavirus kill? The elderly. Who did the politicians lock down? Everyone under 74 in order to maintain their votes and keep their party loyalty politics going? The elderly. Are you starting to see now the truths that are out there? This is why you had this. Who do people worship as gods? Who do people worship? What group worships doctors and nurses as gods? The elderly. Thanks very much. If you want to support me, you can buy a book below or fund my films Patreon below. There's think of it as an investment or a magazine subscription. Don't be afraid. Don't ever be afraid. Inversion, the key to salvation. Take care and God bless. Look after yourselves. I love you.